In the previous little video I did about Bitcoin, I mentioned that someone had said that Bitcoin, I referred to it as nationalist money, which I think is nonsense. And someone in the comments said, yeah, they'd like me to talk a bit more about the ethical morality, the ethical and moral side of Bitcoin, and if it's really everything it's cracked up to be. And my case here is that Bitcoin is not nationalist money because it isn't money and it's not nationalist. It's not money because it's unstable, probably permanently so, and also partly it's not quite as durable. I don't think it's as durable or as liquid as some people make out. And I'd say it's not nationalist if that's if there's such a thing as nationalist money. If you define nationalism as promoting a sense of community and nationhood, if that's the definition of nationalism, then Bitcoin, I don't think there's any way it's nationalist money. I don't think it can ever qualify as that. But compared to what? Well, first of all, I'd like to compare it with cash and with gold. Cash being government money, fiat currency. Now, what tends to happen is when you have government money, you will get the coercive state sticking its fingers into the pie. It will say, we have a monopoly over money, we're going to print it and push it into the economy, we're going to get up all these programs that we want because it feels good. It's a way to get votes. And so what you then get is government spending at the moment on welfare policies. And in order to pay for those, governments have to borrow and they have to tax. And it is easy to borrow and to tax if there is an economic boom going on, particularly a credit boom. And so governments will then print money and lend it into the economy by lending it to banks, or by lending it or by lending it to government, who then spend it into the economy. Now, what that is governments focusing not on the creation of value through work and invention and enterprise, but simply focusing on the number of transactions, whether they create value or not. As long as they're taxable, as long as those transactions happen, they can say, well, this is an economic boom. No, it isn't. It's simply a credit boom. Now, cash is not, you could not describe cash as nationalist money for three reasons. I think firstly, because it divides people by enriching the rich and impoverishing the poor. Secondly, it tends to go along with really horrible, stupid, self-destructive doctrines like feminism and migration and mass immigration. And thirdly, it corrupts and overrides ethical, moral values held between people. Now the first thing, it enriches the rich and impoverishing the poor. It enriches the rich by creating an asset boom. Rich people are the ones who own assets. If asset prices boom, rich people's wealth booms. It's just simple maths. And also because when governments put money into the economy, that money enriches the people who get their hands on it first, before other people can realise that the amount of money has been diluted again. So the people who get their hands on it first, they get rich first. And they tend to be the people who are well-placed, well-connected, big banks, big institutions. Now, it makes the poor poor by diverting money from the poor man into those assets. As that money comes into the economy and it increases the price of speculative assets, then people see those speculative assets going up in price. People want to put their existing money in, they want to chase that money into those assets. So what happens is wealth in society focuses away from people who are working to produce value, and it gets stuffed into speculative asset prices, and that means the poor man gets poorer. And it was described, the best description I can find of this is by a Victorian artist and writer on economics called John Ruskin, who said that it's a way of, quote, getting down at last to him, the furrow driver, and snatching the roots from him as he digs. And that puts it pretty well, the cruelty and unscrupulousness of it. And we see it today with wages stagnating, employment stagnating, but the stock market is booming like never before. And I think there was a screenshot taken from, so I think some American finance and investing show, and on the screen it said worst unemployment since 1938, best week or stock market hits new high. So and what you're seeing is wages stagnating for ordinary people, but ordinary people's expenses in terms of capital assets, rent, insurances and retirement, forget about being able to put money away for a rainy day. All those, the cost of those capital assets is going up and up, and the division that creates, the division and injustice it creates, that creates a seedbed, not just for depression, but for depression followed by collapse and breakdown as the accumulated resentments play out. And secondly, government money, it undermines any sense of community by dividing people, by dissolving the bonds of interdependence and mutual reliance and comfort between people. It destroys trust and engagement. What we see at the moment is we've been part of a long credit boom, and going along hand in hand with that has been the doctrine of feminism, stupid, idiotic, self-destructive idea that is simply, what it amounts to is women being put into the workforce to work full time so that they and their husbands can take home what their husbands were taking home beforehand anyway. So it is women going out to work full time, effectively for nothing, in order to enrich the people right at the top of the asset economy, which lo and behold happens to, they're all male. That is almost the definition of the patriarchy. So women, if you want to enslave yourself for nothing for the rest of your life in order to enrich the patriarchy, be a feminist. Okay. Secondly, mass migration. All that has the same effect as feminism. It dilutes wages by stuffing people into the workforce. Now, there's a correlation between those stupid, dumb, very destructive and unjust doctrines and credit boom. Is there a connection? I think perhaps there is. Well, there's an underlying motivational connection in that all of those doctrines, they lack any focus on underlying value. What they focus on is service to corporatism, or the happy union between government coercive power and big speculative business. Those two together getting served by collapsed money going into those assets and then collapsed wages, and allowing those businesses and those asset prices to be more profitable. That again, so you can't say that cash is in any way promotes a sense of nationhood or community. Quite the reverse. Thirdly, government money, it undermines and overrides ethics. Now, this is best put by a fella called Adam Ferguson, who wrote a book, or this book, in 1973 called When Money Dies, about the Weimar, if you can see that, the Weimar hyperinflation. And that wasn't a credit boom, that was simply a money printing boom, which I think we might see some way down the road, not yet for a few years. But what he said was, quotes, "In hyperinflation, a kilo of potatoes was worth to some more than the family silver, a side of pork more than the grand piano. A prostitute in the family was better than an infant corpse. Theft was preferable to starvation. Warmth was finer than honour, clothing more essential than democracy, food more needed than freedom." So what he's saying is, when you get that hyperinflation or an inflationary boom and the speculation that goes along with it, people are forced to speculate and to outwit each other. All the bonds of honour and trust and engagement between people, you have to sacrifice those simply in order to stay ahead, because you can only stay ahead by beggaring your neighbour, by outwitting your neighbour. And I think it is no surprise that 10 years after that hyperinflation, good Germans were still turning a blind eye and not seeing when their neighbours were getting carted away and just leaving town with or being forced out of town with their goods in a lorry to go who knew where. I think it explains it because that is the existence under hyperinflation or an extreme monetary boom. And the point he makes, which I think is right, is that money is not about money. Money is about values and choices, what you value and what values that you choose. And a government focus on the number of transactions rather than value creation, that takes that focus away from value, underlying value. It undermines the integrity of people's choices. It says keep those transactions going, doesn't matter what they mean. And the inevitable result of a credit boom will then be decadence and just the decline of binding ethics and ethos between or within communities and between communities, and certainly the undermining of a sense of nationhood. At its extreme, that will play out in an extreme abandonment of ethics when governments need to find a big excuse to pump all the more money into the economy, and they then turn to war or civil war or conflict, which seems to be almost the almost universal result or ending to most credit booms in history, needing to find an excuse to spend the money necessary to prolong the boom. So government money is not nationalist money, government fiat money. What about gold? Is Bitcoin, is it nationalist money compared to gold? Well, let's look at gold. I would say gold does promote a sense of nationhood and of community for three reasons. Firstly, its stability. Secondly, its tendency to reduce speculation into the future. And thirdly, because it tends to nurture much better forms of credit. Now, the stability of gold, it should be, it's much deeper than it appears. You can understand why it's stable. There's a limited amount of gold. It's hard to get out of the ground. You can't print it. So prices ought to stay reasonably stable where gold is money. In fact, gold prices stay very stable where gold is money because of gold mining. The price, if the economy is growing, you have industry and technology, you will tend to be reasonably good at mining, so the supply of gold will increase as the economy grows. At the moment, the supply of gold increases by about 2% per year, which means it keeps pace very, very efficiently with with economic growth. So that gold prices remain stable. It becomes really ultra stable because of bills of exchange and credit notes, which can function when you have a very stable commodity like gold acting as money. I'll deal with that in a couple of minutes. But you have stability with gold, and that allows predictability, which then provides a very good foundation for cooperation between people. So that provides economic stability, and that provides social stability. And that out of that social stability, commonly quite a complex ecosystem of commonly held ethics, community ethics, can gradually over generations grow and thrive and bind people together. As was the case, you would have seen that was the case perhaps in the East End of London before the mass immigration boom and before the credit boom. So the stability is the first thing that gold provides. Secondly, if gold is money, it reduces speculation or future credit, lending money into the future at interest, which is historically referred to as usury. That becomes very limited where there is gold, because there's such a limited amount. It becomes so limited that it becomes disapproved of when gold is money, because its tendency to concentrate wealth. That's one of the main problems that it has. If the people who own most of the money lend it to other people at interest, who own most of the gold, lend it at interest, when it's time to repay it, you can't create more gold than exists. So it will inevitably mean that some of those people you lent to will go bankrupt, even if their venture is successful, because they can't find that gold. That gold doesn't exist to pay back. So the security they then gave for the gold that they borrowed will pass into the hands of the lender. So it will inevitably concentrate wealth, which undermines production and creates instability. Now that is that's actually, I think, one reason why governments with fiat currency, just government printed money, they tend to do QE, or they tend to print money into the economy to prevent liquidity crunches like that. But it leads to worse problems with when you're starting printing money to get out of a problem like that. The point is that when gold is money, you get a very limited amount, very little lending money into the future, lending money against future transactions. So I'll lend you money to set up a business and then you'll pay me back. I'll lend you money to build a house, or I'll lend you money because you've got a deal in the offing that will be very profitable. When society in general then focuses, and money focuses away from future speculative assets, then you tend to get a focus on the creation of value now through labour and skill and learning a trade. And on the back of that, you tend to get a respect for labour, a respect for people's trade. You see it in Victorian literature, in Dickens, or the Barchester novels. There tends to be respect for people's trade, and that in turn creates a sense of community, and it softens the class system. It tends to reduce the harshness of the class system, a class system which generally arises out of a successful power grab, such as the power grab we're seeing by the ultra rich in America. I think that is likely to be followed by the creation of and the locking in of quite an unpleasant class system in America, as those ultra rich seek to close their grip and to put on the system by adopting a class, the gloss of class respectability. And so under a gold system, you don't get that. You get the focus on the production and creation of value now, today, in the really close foreseeable future, or value that has already been created. And the way that is enforced is through something you've probably never heard of. I had to look it up to find out about it, and that is called the law of reflux. Now, in the 19th century, that was well known. It was a thing. You had parliamentary committees reporting on it, and it was called a law because it was inevitable that it would happen. And what that would mean is that, well, let's say you own some gold, you deposit it at Barclays Bank, and Barclays give you a note for it saying you can come and get the gold back. But they might say you're unlikely to redeem that note and take that gold back for a few years, or only half their clients or their customers are going to redeem the gold. They can issue some other gold notes to other people. They can lend them out and then take some interest. What the law of reflux says is, if Barclays do that and they issue a lot of gold notes, that they lend them out to people, to business people wanting to set up businesses or to do things in the future, then the marketplace will sense that Barclays has lent too many of those into the economy, and the value of Barclays gold notes will go down. People will start to suspect them. Just supply and demand will mean that Barclays gold notes will go down, they'll reduce in value. And that will mean that ordinary people like me, I would have an incentive to buy up one of those Barclays gold notes and go to Barclays Bank and say, this note, I bought this note for less than the gold is worth in your vaults. I'll give you the note, give me the gold, and I'll make a little profit. What it then does is it incentivizes other banks, so HSBC or TSB, to buy up all the Barclays gold notes it can in order to put Barclays out of business, and to go and say, come on, give us the gold, give us all the gold in your vaults. And when Barclays can't do that, Barclays goes bust, but the competition, Barclays goes out of business. That is the law of reflux. That is how banks policed each other, and that is how the financial system remained stable. And the result of that is you had very little of the speculative speculation into the future. You didn't have speculative. You were unlikely to get. You didn't get speculative mania under a very strict gold system. Although it's very difficult to have a strict gold system if you have the state, because the state will also want to stick its dirty coercive fingers into the pie. But what you tended to get, instead of having money lending and credit focusing on future transactions, setting up a business, buying and building a house in the future, you had credit focusing on transactions that have already taken place in the form of credit notes and bills of exchange. And that's the third reason why gold is good for a sense of community, and that is by focusing its credit on transactions that have already taken place, by issuing credit notes to people, bills of exchange, it creates a gold system will tend to create a sense of trust. It will foster trust, respectability and community in the marketplace and in wider society. The way a credit note or a bill of exchange works is, if I'm a farmer and I turn up at the corn exchange, I don't want to carry gold with me to the market. I don't want to carry gold home because I could get mugged. So I'll turn up at the marketplace, and all of the people trading, we might know each other in that corn exchange. We don't deal in gold, we deal in credit notes for gold. So I buy a ton of corn from someone and I give them an ounce of gold in the form of an IOU, saying I will pay you an ounce of gold. And the fellow I buy the ton of grain from, he might buy a ton of potatoes off someone else. He might use that same note, saying, and if I am respectable and respected, that note that I've signed saying I owe you an ounce of gold, that will be as good as money, because people will know that I'm not going to stiff them, I'm not going to shaft them. I'll cough up that ounce of gold if it's presented to me. And what that does is to put respectability and character at a premium, which is why in free market economies where you don't have the intervening state, they become actually very moralistic. Again, look at Victorian literature. Look at the northern states of America, that became very moralistic about things like slavery. And it creates a free market society will create a moralistic society, because you need to be able to show your ethics, your respectability, your good morals, in order to be able to trade, in order to be able to do business. And on the back of that, you will tend to get a common set of ethics and ethos, which won't simply be, it'll be necessary for trade, but it won't only be for trade, it will be necessary for living together. For just people who live on the same street will want to show that they have the same values as their neighbours, so that they can be respected, so they can just feel part of the group, so they can feel that they belong. And those ethics, that system of ethics, that what I would refer to as a gradually rising, growing ethical or ecosystem and ethos, that those ethics will tend to cohere and to bind together around identity. And identity probably being a sense of nationhood. So I'm a good Englishman, I have these values, I have these sporting ethics, I'm honest, I believe in fair play. On the back of that, you get a sense of nationhood, a sense of common, predictable values. So I think gold, that, if anything, is nationalist money. It creates the opposite of what you have today, which is the decadence of welfare, bailouts and unlimited credit, which means you don't really need to rely on your neighbour. What your neighbour thinks of you doesn't matter. Your neighbour can go to hell because you can survive without him. The welfare state will look after you. There's a bailout somewhere. You can always borrow more money, stick it on the credit card. There is no need for that binding system of ethics. It is gold just naturally will get rid of that. So I think it is nationalist money. Now, if I look at, let's look at Bitcoin and see if Bitcoin is likely to be nationalist money. Does it meet any of those standards for creating a sense of nationhood, creating a sense of community? Well, first of all, Bitcoin, I think, has absolutely no stability. To say that it has no stability demeans unstable things. It is incredibly volatile. I think that volatility is permanent. It is built in to the architecture. It is not suddenly going to become ultra stable once everyone accepts it as money. And you don't even know, is it going to keep going up in value or reducing in value? If Bitcoins reduce in number, once they've all been mined, and then they reduce in number because people lose them, as they do. People throw out the wrong laptop, they lose a hard drive in a flood or in a fire, or they forget their password. Well, you get the deterioration, the loss of Bitcoins. that should mean that bitcoins keep going up in value, that bitcoins are deflationary. That means you don't get all those other things. You can't get credit notes issued in Bitcoin, because I wouldn't give you a credit note saying I owe you 1 Bitcoin if I know that, and you can redeem it at any time you like, if I know that Bitcoin are going up in value, because you might keep it for a decade and come back and bankrupt me when Bitcoin is worth more than I can't lay my hands on a single Bitcoin. Or is it going to go the other way? Are Bitcoins effectively going to get diluted, in which case they're inflationary, in which case you wouldn't accept a credit note from me saying I owe you 1 Bitcoin, because it might not be worth as much next week. And it is possible that Bitcoins will, it's just impossible to say that Bitcoins won't prove inflationary, because you get things like forks. They dilute. Bitcoin Cash, it has value. It has value because it's taking some reflected glory from Bitcoin. It's stealing some of the value out of Bitcoin. That means it's diluting the value of Bitcoin. So those forks do dilute the value. Then what about other cryptocurrencies? There are loads of the number of cryptocurrencies. I heard of some companies that simply by putting the word blockchain in their name trebled their share price during, I think this was about 3 years ago. My point is, it's impossible to know, is Bitcoin going to tend to be always going up in price, or is it going to tend to be always going down in price once it hits the mining limit? You don't know. The point is, it is unstable. That instability is built into its architecture, and that means if it's unstable, it can't be money, because you can't put it away in a bank and use it as a store of value. Forget about whether it's how durable it is, or or the fact that you can only do 7 transactions per second with Bitcoin, which means it's not really very liquid. And that instability means that Bitcoin is an object not of investment but of speculation. And speculation doesn't create community, it undermines it, it divides it, it destroys it. Bitcoin investors will talk of themselves as the Bitcoin community. They are not a community. Bitcoin investors profit from each other's misfortune. If I invest in Bitcoin, I want other Bitcoin owners to make bad decisions, so that I want other people to get in after I've bought. I want them to sell after I've sold. And I want the guy I buy from, the person I buy from, I want him to sell at a point when Bitcoin is unusually cheap. So it is not a community. The values are not shared within Bitcoin. It sets people against each other. And as I say, that speculation can be either up or down. There is not the stability, there is not the predictability, and that predictability is the essential foundation for cooperation and reliance on character. Without those community values, those character values, that speculation effectively becomes international, because a Bitcoin owner will have more in common with other Bitcoin owners around the world than with his neighbours, because you don't have that shared value among, I don't think you're going to get those shared values among Bitcoin owners. And that is, again, a bad foundation for the community of values on which a self-conscious sense of nationhood is based. And without that stability, I think it's probably inevitable. If Bitcoin were to become money, it would be necessary, it would be inevitable that some coercive mechanism, some overpowering coercive mechanism would be brought in order to try and stabilize Bitcoin, to smooth it out. Because if all societies use Bitcoin, the society that will be most successful is the one that submits itself to a coercive mechanism which prevents those fluctuations with Bitcoin, either by forcibly saying something else should be treated as equal to Bitcoin in order to increase and reduce the supply, or simply by banning certain transactions. And the societies that adopt that coercive method will outcompete the ones that don't. So it will eventually, at some stage, I think, have to become a sort of a form of state money. I don't see how that I'm speculating. I'm I'm guessing there, but I don't see how that could be avoided if Bitcoin were suddenly adopted by everyone as money. Now, the third reason why I don't think Bitcoin can be nationalist money, why it can't create a sense of nationhood or community, is because you are, as I said previously, you're not going to get bills of exchange and credit notes for transactions that have already taken place. So I've sold you, or you've sold me, a ton of wheat, and I give you a credit note. I could do that for a gold coin because you know the gold coin will remain stable. That couldn't happen with a Bitcoin. There's no way you would accept a credit note saying, I'm going to give you one Bitcoin in 3 months' time. There's no way I would do it because it could bankrupt me, or the Bitcoin could plunge in value and you don't get your full value. So when you don't get that kind of credit, you don't have the bonds of trust between people. What you get, you can only then get credit as future speculation. That becomes the only form of credit. And when you don't have that that kind of credit, bills of exchange and credit notes, you don't have the need for respectability and community values between people who are doing business and doing trade. When you don't have that drive for community values, you tend not to have an ethos around which a sense of nationhood and culture can bind itself and grow. So I do not think that Bitcoin is nationalist money. Now, that doesn't mean I'm saying that doesn't mean you shouldn't get into it. I am not saying I'm too ethical to invest in Bitcoin. I'm saying I'm too dumb. I don't think I'm smart enough to outwit the other Bitcoin owners. I don't want to try. And if I lose, as I might well do, I'll then look at myself and say, I deserve to lose. I was stupid, shouldn't have done it. But if you're smarter than me, you do it, make all the money you can. I think people will make, or have the opportunity to make large sums of money yet with Bitcoin. But you tell me, if you're saying that it is nationalist money, that it will create a sense of community and nationhood and a binding culture between people, you tell me that again when the big shots of Bitcoin in the Bitcoin community, who I think those guys understand perfectly well the implications of the inbuilt instability of Bitcoin, when they have cashed out quietly before the top of the market. You know the guys who are shouting loudly, buy Bitcoin, it's going to change society, we'll have a wonderful society as a result. When you find that they have cashed out quietly without telling you, and that you're left holding the bag afterwards, then tell me about the Bitcoin community and about nationalist money. Thank you.